Hi, my name is Jubilee, and today I'm going to find out what color reader I am. I have seen this quiz going around at a couple different places. It is readyourcolor.com. The idea is that you are finding out what type of reader you are. I love a personality quiz. I used to be a person who would do every single quiz on BuzzFeed every single day. I love seeing like, oh, what cat are you based on your XYZ? So I thought this is a perfect opportunity for me to do a personality quiz based on books. So I have the quiz pulled up right here. So let's find out what I am. Let's do this. Okay. A poetic memoir weaves together fragments, dreams, journal entries, old text, chronicling the author's healing after grief. Would I read that? I don't read a lot of nonfiction to begin with. I have been reading a couple more memoirs recently, and this actually sounds pretty similar to a couple of memoirs that I have read and liked. I'm gonna say might read because I don't read very many of them, but I do enjoy them when I get past that pickiness. How about a woman falls in love with a man through anonymous letters exchanged in library books, never meeting until fate intervenes. That sounds kind of similar to Divine Rivals would be the first thing that came to mind. That sounds like something I wouldn't pick up a lot, but I might enjoy, so I'm gonna go might read again. In a city run by corporations, a lone data hacker risks everything to uncover the truth behind a mass digital blackout. That sounds vaguely interesting, at least. I mean, maybe. Why am I putting might read for everything? Okay. In a shattered world ruled by elemental warlords, a cursed warrior and an outcast prince form a forbidden bond that could remake the realm. Okay, that sounds like a fantasy romance, but like the elemental warlords sounds interesting. I'll put would probably read. Let's put some fantasy in there. A solitary monk walks across America, encountering strangers who subtly reshape his inner life and beliefs. Is this fiction or nonfiction? That doesn't sound like something that would jump out at me. I don't know. We'll say probably not to give some different answers. Drawing on neuroscience and ancient philosophy, this guide helps overthinkers learn to make better decisions. As much as I am an overthinker, and I am overthinking these questions, it doesn't sound like something that would draw me. A surrealist artist discovers her paintings are portals to real worlds, and something is starting to come back through the canvas. I have read a book like this, and I didn't like it that much. But like, that does sound like something I would be interested in. I like surrealist type stuff. A grumpy CEO starts to rethink what's important to him after he falls in love with the new VP of marketing. Would not read. Bye. Out of here. An ex-assassin hiding in Alaska must confront his past when his daughter is taken by a vengeful arms dealer. That doesn't sound like something I would be interested in. A chef journeys across post-Soviet Europe searching for the recipes that defined her grandmother's lost homeland. Again, is it fiction or nonfiction? If someone really recommended that to me, maybe I'd pick it up, but that's not something that I would pick up on my own, I don't think. A multi-generational novel told from the perspective of a single house and the people who lived, loved, and died within it. I would read that. Absolutely. A deep dive into how food systems, global trade, and local economies shape the way we eat and how to eat better. That sounds like a little bit more something that I'm interested in. Like, that kind of reminds me of the way that Everything is Tuberculosis was talking about, how different health systems have come to shape things. I think I like big system-y type things, so that's a might read. A linguist and an ex-CIA operative must decode an ancient manuscript before a secret society reshapes history. I think that reminds me of Lexicon by Max Barry, which I really liked the beginning of and didn't really love how it ended. That sounds more like an action-y book, so I'm gonna put might read. A novel told entirely through footnotes and deleted Wikipedia entries reconstructs the life of a time traveler who never existed. I would read the heck out of that. I would totally read that. Okay, a struggling screenwriter falls for the nanny of his ex-wife kids in a story filled with awkward charm, bad coffee, and unexpected kisses. If I heard pretty good reviews of that, like, that doesn't sound bad. And I like books about a writer, so maybe I'll put might read. That sounds better than the other romances on here. In a future where dreams can be uploaded and bought, a woman begins to lose the line between memory and product. I probably read that. A former Silicon Valley exec shares what broke him, what healed him, and how to live a more intentional digital life. I'm interested in reading Careless People, which is the recent memoir about the woman who's talking about her time at Meta. I'm interested in reading a book that is like that because of things that are going on. I don't know that this specifically. I'm gonna go probably would not read. Here's the thing. I would pick up anything if I was told that I would probably like it by enough people. There are very few things that I would never read, and it's hard for me to say, oh, I would definitely read that. I am a person who loves like every single genre. There are favorites that I have in every genre I've ever read, and I read most of them, so I'm pretty flexible. A rescue team in Antarctica picks up a distress signal from a base that officially does not exist and never did. That sounds like action-y horror isolated area. I'd pick that up. A cultural critic's essay collection on the end of privacy, the aesthetics of apocalypse, and what comes after capitalism. That sounds interesting. Sure. I'll go would probably read. A woman uncovers a box of unsent childhood letters and begins to rewrite the story of her childhood. That feels vague enough that like a lot of things could be going on there. I do like a person reflecting on like their life. A clear, no-nonsense manual on how to lead teams with empathy, structure, and long-term vision. No, I don't need a self-help book. Thank you. An ornithologist joins a rogue expedition to find a supposedly extinct bird when the team starts vanishing one by one. Sure, I'll put might read. 2 more questions. In an alternate 1800s, that's a good sign, a woman disguises herself as a man to join a pirate crew in search of a mythical island said to grant second lives. That sounds a little bit like A Darker Shade of Magic, and maybe also like Amina al-Sarafi. I really love Dark Shade of Magic. Amina al-Sarafi was okay, but I like the author's other books. That's a book that I would probably read. A box of mementos hidden by her late husband sends a young widow on a cross-country road trip through memory and mourning. I might read that if I heard really good reviews. And that's the last question. I am a purple reader. What does that mean? The fact that green is the lowest and green is my favorite color, upsetting. How could they do that to me? Okay, let's explore what a purple... The unbound innovator. What is a purple reader? The purple reader is the unbound innovator, a bold, unconventional thinker who thrives on experimental storytelling and genre-defying narratives. I do love a book that blends genres. They read to challenge norms, stretch their imagination, and fuel radical creativity. After finishing a book, they want to feel intellectually awakened and creatively invigorated, as if they've glimpsed a new way of seeing the world. Sure, I mean, yeah. The kind of books that you read are wild, unconventional, and impossible to categorize. You're drawn to stories that break rules, narratives that twist form, blur genres, or leap through time and space without warning. Traditional plot arcs don't impress you nearly as much as originality, voice, and sheer creative risk. You love authors who challenge assumptions and expectations and invite you into strange, brilliant new worlds. Whether it's fiction that feels like a fever dream or nonfiction that dares to imagine entirely new futures, you crave ideas that crack open your thinking. Your bookshelf isn't safe. It's a playground for the wildly inventive and beautifully bizarre. If I find out a book has a really interesting structure to it, that is something that I am definitely going to be looking for, and things that are being innovative. A lot of my favorite books that I can think of are ones that don't necessarily do one thing. I'll give some recommendations based on this. Okay. My fiction preferences are experimental and postmodern novels, surreal or dreamlike fables, books with non-linear structures or shifting perspectives, genre mashups and speculative fiction with a philosophical edge, literary fiction that breaks form or plays with language. And my nonfiction preferences are avant-garde essays and unconventional memoirs, speculative cultural criticism, futurist manifestos and radical theory, philosophy or psychology that explores abstract or fringe ideas, books on creativity, innovation, and alternate ways of thinking. For the books it recommended me, it had Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace, which I have not read, Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell, which I almost read for a video recently. Mona Wad, who's one of my favorite authors, has said that Cloud Atlas is a huge inspiration for her. Haruki Murakami, Kafka on the Shore. I have not read a Murakami either. Kafka on the Shore, I've heard a lot about, very much like a literary fiction darling. Don't know if it's going to be for me. I've also heard some people say they don't love how he talks about women, which is probably something that I'm not going to get with. But the last book on here is The Road by Cormac McCarthy, which I just grabbed this from a little free library like 2 weeks ago. I have been spoiled for what happens at the end of this book, but I feel like it is kind of par for the course for the book and wouldn't actually ruin it. So this means that maybe this should be pushed up my TBR. There was an email list area on there that was, you can put in your email and you get free recommendations weekly. So I'm interested in that. But I thought I would give a couple of recommendations based on the type that I just got. Experimental and postmodern novels, surreal or dreamlike fables, books with non-linear structures or shifting perspectives, genre mashups, speculative fiction with a philosophical edge. I can think of several books that match that type that I have already read and loved. Bunny by Mona Awad is definitely one. This is a literary horror that is about our main character Samantha, who is in a creative writing MFA program, and the only other people who are in her program is this clique of 4 other women. They're obsessed with each other and they call each other Bunny all the time. And one day she actually gets invited to join them at their smut salon where they read all their stuff to each other. It's like a fever dream where our main character isn't really sure what's going on. And I think the themes behind the book really push up the amount of horror in it. Honestly, the number one book that came to mind while I was reading these recommendations would be How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. This is one of my favorite books. This is a novel that is set up as if it is a short story collection where we see through years and then decades and then in a couple cases hundreds of years how humanity has changed after a single event has happened. And that event is that a cave person body is unearthed and that ends up releasing this plague. It becomes a pandemic and ends up disproportionately affecting children. The first couple of short stories in this are dealing with that as it's happening, and then the stories that are further than that are about how that couple of years ended up affecting the world on a large scale. And these short stories are deeply, deeply interconnected. I ended up taking notes on the book of how much one person would show up multiple times and how there were references here and there to the same people showing up. For a nonfiction, look no further than In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a memoir that is mostly about Machado's experience in a abusive relationship that also happened to be queer. It is told in very short chapters and in vignettes to create one big picture of how it shrinks a person to be in that sort of relationship, how the things that happened to her in the past sort of primed her to accept an abusive relationship. And it is beautifully written. It will make you so sad. Another book that came to mind was Sorrowland by River Solomon, one of my favorites. This is a hard book to categorize. It is in the speculative sphere for sure, but is it more fantasy or a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of horror in there, but is it more on the general fiction side? Who knows? It's hard to categorize this book, and I think that's what the Purple Reader is getting at. But our main character, Vern, escaped a cult that she was in when she was 15 and very pregnant, and she ends up escaping into the forest to have her children, and she ends up getting ill and has to return to society to try to save herself and her children. Strange things seem to be happening to her body. So sometimes we're reflecting on her time in the cult and a friend that she lost while she was there and is trying to find again. And it's about her trying to trust again. And also a lot about identity, as our main character does not fit into the categories that were forced on her as a child. I think if you're also a fan of the Octavia Butler, Toni Morrison kind of crossover, River Solomon is the way to go, and this would be my pick. And when it's talking about postmodernism, Slaughterhouse-Five, that's another one of my favorite books of all time. And I haven't talked about it a lot recently. This is a modern classic that is about World War II. The author, Kurt Vonnegut, he volunteered for World War II while he was actually too young. He actually lied about his age and got sent to Dresden, which was supposed to be a super safe place for people to be. But these American troops actually ended up getting bombed by their own allies in what is, at least at the time, the worst civilian bombing in European history. And in this book, our main character, Billy Pilgrim, was in the bombing of Dresden, just like Kurt Vonnegut was, and he has found himself since then unstuck in time. He experiences his life out of order, and all just gets mixed up as we see things out of order. And on top of that, he also believes that he has been abducted by aliens called the Tralfamadorians, if I'm not wrong, who are these aliens who experience all of their life at one time. It is a story about PTSD before PTSD was even a coined term that we use. It's back when we called it shell shock. That was a really formative reading experience that I had, and I think I need to reread that book. I don't think I've ever given it a full proper reread. It's absurd, but it's also very serious at the same time. Balancing tones and balancing genres is something that the Purple Reader would really like. Thanks for coming with me finding out what reader I am. I'd love to know what kind of reader you are and what book recommendations you were given. Do you have any recommendations for me as a purple reader? But thank you so much for watching. If you would like to follow me anywhere, you can find me in the links in the description, or you can subscribe if you want to see more of my videos. I'd love to have you around. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.